Let me just say that this is a unique, well, almost unique election right now in the sense that we have so many candidates seeking presidential nomination on the Republican side. Let me just say that I'm going to talk about several phases in the campaign. First, the nomination, really from February to June, and a little bit about the candidates, the conventions, the debates that are likely to occur, and then the final stretch, September to October in 16. We're a long ways away from that. If you look at the number of candidates seeking presidential nomination, look at I don't know if you can see this, but the far left, you probably can't see it, so just listen. Look at 1976. That was the year that Ford ran against Carter. There were two candidates in the Republican Party. It was Ford and Reagan. It was the last time that no one really knew who was going to win in the convention when they went into the convention. And finally, after the convention vote, Ford won on the first ballot. Reagan obviously went on to become president later on. Carter, it's similar to this year. Carter was an outsider, and he really used this as a way to get support. That was after a phenomenon called Watergate. How many of you have heard of Watergate? Okay, good, great. You know, my students barely know who Mick Jagger is, let alone Watergate, so that's good. And huge scandal associated with Watergate, and people wanted somebody new, a non-Washington politician. There were 14 candidates that year. Some of them you may remember by reading about them, but one of them is governor of California right now, Jerry Brown. Governor Moonbeam, he was called because he had some wild ideas. But Udall and Church from Idaho, Scoop Jackson from the state of Washington was thought to win. But he sat out the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary, and that was fatal to him because you really need to compete there. This may be an issue this year with respect to some of these candidates, including Hillary Clinton, who seems to be behind in Iowa and New Hampshire and is going to use the super primary period to try to have a firewall and stop Bernie Sanders. Not that he's going to get the nomination, but the strategy is a critical one in terms of sitting out those events. The schedule, don't worry, I won't go through every one of these. The first events are Iowa. It's a caucus state, so you really need to organize at the grassroots. You'll hear about this later, I think, from the campaign professionals. A caucus state is different, and Hillary found that out last time. You have to go out and listen to people, and a community organizer like Obama is a person that learned how to listen and then find out what people wanted and to push ahead with policies. She went out and pronounced things, and that didn't go very well. New Hampshire, Bernie Sanders is significantly ahead of Hillary in New Hampshire. The latest poll as of yesterday, he has 49%, she has 38%. Of course, he's very close in terms of being known in the Northeast there. If you go on, you look in March, look at the super primary, which is on the 1st of March. That's very important. Hillary's firewall, so to speak, according to some outside commentators, is that. There are many states from the South. Bernie Sanders is likely not to do well in the South. I think that the nomination for the Democratic Party will likely be over after the super primary or a few events after that. There's, of course, the question of Biden. Vice President Biden has to make a decision whether he's going to run. Theoretically, he has to make that decision before the debate that's coming up on the 13th. If he doesn't, the theory is that if Hillary totally goes down in the polls, then people will turn to him and he will run. He's older. Hillary is older also, and that becomes an issue. If you look at the conventions, they're earlier than usual. The Republican Party had a major reforms that went on in terms of the number of debates and when the conventions would be, it's likely that the Republicans will have spent a great deal of money fighting each other internally. That internal battle is really a revolution going on within the party. And you can see it with respect to the battle over the leadership position, the Speaker of the House of Representatives right now. It looks like McCarthy, who was going to take the place of Boehner, may not be elected. We'll see, because there are over 50 people who are not supporting him, but we'll see how that works out. You need 218 votes in the House of Representatives. It's just an indication of how many cleavages there are in the party, especially in the far right, pulling the party to the far right. And the Republican candidates are battling over that. If you look at the candidates, you can see that Donald Trump has been doing very well, and he's dropped Ben Carson, Jeb Bush, you've heard of, Fiorina, and Rubio. Now, if you look at Trump and Carson and Fiorina, they're all outsiders. They're non-politicians. It's the same phenomena as Carter running as a non-Washington, D.C. person. I think Rubio's strategy also is to not be of Washington, although he's been there for a while. Jeb Bush is obviously not of Washington, but he's of a family that's associated with two presidencies, obviously. If you look at the popularity of the Republican contenders, Carson has gone up significantly. Rubio, Cruz, Fiorina, Walker's out. Trump, Huckabee, Jeb Bush is down with Kasich, and Rand Paul is out of it. If you look at these candidates in terms, I hope you can see this, it probably can't, but it's really candidates that are on the far right, Huckabee, Santorum, Carson. The people that are moderate or establishment are Bush and Kasich and Rubio to a certain extent. I think you should watch these three candidates, because as Trump goes down and the field sort of thins out, I think those are some of the most important candidates to watch. They're establishment in the sense that the establishment of the party wants somebody in the middle. Yes, deliver the base in the primary and caucuses, but then you have to move slightly towards the middle in order to win in the general election. So deliver the base and then move to the middle. And so look at those candidates as we go through the primaries. Hillary's going significantly down. I don't think the screen is not showing this, but she's gone down significantly. Hillary's at 43%, and Sanders is going up. Sanders, an avowed socialist from Vermont, actually from Brooklyn, who has transferred to Vermont, very active in the anti-war movement. He's turning out a lot of young people. He's, in this third quarter, gotten almost exactly the amount of money coming in, about $28 million in his campaign, as Hillary, which was a great surprise to everybody. And down at the bottom, you have other candidates, including Biden. If you look at favorability, Hillary is, as of the last poll on this from Gallup, 74%, based on Democrats and leaning Democrats, not everybody. She's still favorable. Bernie's going up, and the others are really insignificant in terms of where they are in terms of favorability. Now, if you look at a campaign, campaign finance is very important. Just a little bit about campaign finance. It's getting incredibly expensive to run a campaign. Obama in 2008 brought in $745 million. He promised to take public finance, and McCain did, and didn't take the outside money. And McCain had $43 million, he had $745 million. Incredible amount of money. But later, in 2012, both Romney and Obama, in terms of the campaign, not outside groups or parties, had $1 billion. The total in 2008 was $4 billion, $6 billion in 2012. It's likely to be $8 billion. $8 billion this year if you take all the super PACs, the party organizations, other organizations, and the campaign. Part of this is allowed because of the Supreme Court case Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. How many of you have heard of Citizens United? Good. What school do you go to? You're doing well. Citizens United was a decision that allowed for the creation of so-called super PACs, where you can bring in an unlimited amount of money, spend an unlimited amount of money, and not report it immediately. Now, theoretically, you cannot coordinate. Coordination is a legal term of coordinating between the candidate, a super PAC, and the party. That's illegal. It's done informally all the time. That really allowed for this increase in super PAC spending, which is, I think, undermining the quality of our democracy, but we can talk about that later. The ground war, which people will talk about later, GOTV, get out the vote, like Lou did going door to door with his 9-year-old daughter, is absolutely important, and the media doesn't cover it very well. The ground war in Iowa and the primary for Obama was essential. He really delivered the ground war. In other words, having strategic turn out the vote activities, getting people registered, getting them turned, and having them turn out. At American University, I started the Campaign Management Institute 25 years ago. By the way, we have a couple of students from this university in that program this year, and they're doing very well. They learn about micro-targeting, not knocking on everybody's door, but figuring out people who are likely to be Democrats or likely to be Republicans, and that's part of the campaign. Each campaign is a war. That's what campaign means. Each campaign has different tactics and tools, but the most important one in the end is to turn out the vote and turn out the base of your voters. This time the ground war will focus not only on turning out the base, but also looking at independents. Now, there's a myth about independents. If you look at the polls and you ask people, are you independent? They say yes. Then you ask another question, do you lean Democratic or lean Republican? About a third lean Democrat, a third Republican, and the last third are truly independents. But what we find out is independents don't vote. They don't vote in primaries because there are closed primaries in many states, but they don't vote in the general election. So it's an ever diminishing amount of people that you can go after in terms of going after the independents in these elections. But also Latinos are very important in this state, important in Colorado, or 2 of the 10 battleground states, and all Latinos don't vote the same way, of course, or Hispanics, Cubans are very different than other Latinos. By the way, Obama won 72% of the Latino vote in the last election. George W. Bush had 44%. The theory is that you have to have 40+% of the Latino vote for the Republican Party to win in these states. You need to have a clear strategy, theme, and message. It's not clear now what the strategy, theme, and message is of, say, Trump, other than being against Washington, saying that there are a bunch of stupid people in Washington. He does have some statements on taxes that have not been thoroughly vetted yet. Other candidates, it's hard to figure out what their position is on these things because it's been about personality to a certain extent and about whether you're against Washington and you want to change Washington, whether on the Republican side you want to shrink government or not. The money game in this thing is very important, but also the use of social media and also the air war. Air war is television advertising. You'll hear a lot about that. The air war means that you have this massive television ad campaign, then you go on the ground war trying to turn people out, and you turn them out in a variety of ways, through social media, through direct contact. The money race, there's too much data here, but Jeb Bush is doing very well in the money race. He seems to be floundering, though, in terms of his strategy and message, and going down in the polls. And Bernie Sanders is doing pretty well, as is Hillary these days. Where's the money coming from? With Jeb Bush, to a great extent, it's coming from outside money, $108 million from a lot of contributors that are giving maximum amount of contributions or through super PACs. Ted Cruz, Rubio are next. Hillary is bringing in about the same as Sanders, and you can see that her money is from the outside also. This is the invisible primary period, where you look at the money and you look at the endorsements. And the endorsements, Hillary is trying to bring in endorsements from the super delegates. Those are the people, about a third of the convention are people that are members of Congress, governors and others, that are free to vote whatever they want. She has about 340 of those at this point, a massive number compared to Sanders. If you look at America, this is it. As you well know, you've seen the Electoral College. It's really the Confederate South and the cowboy states are the Republican Party. When you look at the national campaign, you need 270 to win, and of course, in 2012, Obama got 332. He had a majority in the Electoral College in 2008, as well as he won in Virginia and North Carolina, and a majority in the popular vote, which was the first time since FDR that we didn't have the Boston-Austin axis. What's that mean? Somebody from the north and somebody from the south. Unless you think South Chicago is the South, he did very well. And he was the first, obviously, African American to be elected President of the United States. It was a phenomenal thing. It excited young people. You'll see the data on that later. It excited America, and many Republicans voted for him in that election. If you look at the Electoral College in another way, we have a lot of sorting going on. Finally, I get a laugh. Now, I'm from Oregon, and I understand the tree huggers up there. Those are the pot-growing, smoking, socialist tree huggers up in the Northeast. From about San Francisco up, Hollywood liberals, the gamblers. No offense to anybody with these names here. And the snake handlers down in the Confederate South. Okay, and Ohio. Ohio's big. Watch Kasich. He moves ahead, and he's governor of Ohio. He's moderate. I've met him. He's a good guy, and he is implementing the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, and it's doing very well in Ohio. If he gets close to the nomination, and he can deliver Ohio and a couple of other battleground states, it's going to be a very close election, in my opinion. If you look at the battleground states, they're here. You're definitely a battleground state. If you look at, in fact, Colorado and Florida, you're evenly split from 1992 to 2012. It's off the screen up there. But you've had 3 times in Florida that a Republican has won, 3 times a Democrat has won, and Colorado is the same. So you're right at the middle. You're right at the heart of this election, the heart of democracy. And I hope that you get involved in campaigns. There's nothing like a campaign to learn about how democracy works, to talk with people about the candidates and the issues that are involved. Iowa, Nevada, New Hampshire, Ohio. 2 times for the Republicans, 4 times for the Democrats. It's likely that that'll be a key battleground state to watch as we go into this election. If you look at the voters and campaign strategy in 2016, there are a few things to think about. One is that we have de-alignment going on. What's that mean? Realignment means the South was realigned after 1965 Voting Rights Act. It used to be Democratic, Dixiecrats. The South started changing slowly and it became Republican. We have all Republican senators, and I don't include Florida in the South. It's a different kind of place. It's not part of the Confederacy the way the rest of the South is. You find that the South is realigned, but we also have de-alignment with the party. More and more people saying that they're independents. In the latest polls, 34% when asked say they're Democrats and 27% Republicans. Now the Republican Party knows it has a problem. The establishment of the Republican Party really knows this, and that's one of the reasons George W. Bush tried very hard to push through an immigration bill over 10 years ago with Ted Kennedy and McCain and others. It failed by 4 votes to get cloture, in other words, a vote to stop a filibuster in the Senate. It would have passed if they had 4 more votes. The theory is from George W. Bush is that you have to pass a balanced immigration bill, and others say this also. Rubio said this at one point and then he backed off of it. You need a balanced immigration bill, then appeal to Hispanics who are pretty conservative on a variety of issues like pro-choice, pro-life, the role of family, taxes. They come from places like Guatemala where they don't like government and they want government to shrink in terms of their freedoms. Yet that has not happened. It will not happen before this next election as a result of the nature of what's going on the Hill. If you look at turnout, it's been 55%, the average turnout of eligible voters from FDR to President Obama. It was a little over 62% in 2008, 62% in 2012. And one of the reasons for that is early voting, which we'll talk about here in a second. You can see that in 2008, 62.3 dropped to 57.5, not 62. That was 62 in the last slide was in reference to 2008. Some people are thinking that the turnout this time will be lower because of certain minorities not turning out at the same rate as in 2008 and when Obama first ran. Early voting is a reason for the increased turnout from 55%. Early voting means mail-out ballots where you can spend 10 days to fill out the ballot. I'm from Oregon. The ballot's very long because of initiatives and referenda. They have 10 days to fill out the ballot and mail it in. There are more and more states that are doing this, and there's pushback by the Republican Party from doing this because they're worried about fraud. But as you can see by this slide, the number of states having early voting is going up. Now, some think it makes sense because in Ohio, for example, if you don't have early voting, you turn out for the election, maybe it's snowing, and you've had 2 jobs, you take your kids, you stand in line in a snowstorm for 45 minutes, an hour to vote. You basically say, forget it, and you go home and have dinner. This makes it easier to vote. It makes it more open for a variety of people who have the kind of jobs that need to have more time to vote. The historic youth turnout, as you can see, from 72 to present, has gone down slightly in the last 2012. You can see that we have 2 lines of non-college individuals with no college experience turning out at 28.6%, people with college 55.9%, which is going down, which is a problem for our democracy, and hopefully, when you get to the age when you can vote, you will. If you look at gender, you can see that the slide is off, so you can't see this, but you can see that 2012 exit polls that there was a gender gap, a significant gender gap between Obama and Romney. Obama appealed to women, and Romney appealed to men at a high rate. If you look at the issues, pardon me, if you look at Hispanic voters, just a little bit, this is somewhat dated data from the census, but you can see that Florida has a significant Hispanic population. New Mexico has the most Hispanics. It's a Democratic state. It's not a battleground state, but as you can see, the percent of Hispanics is significant in these states. Colorado and Florida are battleground states to watch in terms of the Hispanic vote. What are the issues? Well, the interesting thing about the issues is usually the economy is way off the charts in terms of the importance of the economy. Jobs, how it's performing. But the Washington culture is very close to an important issue in this campaign. What does that mean? It means the functioning of Washington. It means the gridlock that we have. People are quite upset with the way Congress is working, but also the way the federal government is working. If you look at also trust in the media, it is going down. So a general unhappiness with Washington, which appeals to these non-candidate, non-politician candidates that are out there, like Trump and others. If you look at the most important issue of that people say, a little different data set from the Gallup, 35% of the American people think that the economy is the most important issue. If you look at how Obama won in 2012, it's instructive for this particular candidate. He focused on Hispanics and Latinos. He got 72% of the Hispanic vote. Youth vote, he got 67% of the youth vote. Asians, who usually are split 50-50, he got 75% of the Asians in 2012. African Americans, 93% of African Americans. Women, 68%. So he also had some good news about the job report. Superstorm Sandy had a modest impact on his campaign. He had a massive ground game. He spent a great deal of money on GOTV strategy. And then this stealth micro-targeting that's going on that all the candidates are doing right now. If you look at, I'll keep going because I'm running short on time here. If you look at the question of trust in government, this is very disturbing, actually. Trust in government's going down. Also, performance of Congress is going down. It's at 14% of the American people think it's doing a good or outstanding job. Now, Senator McCain said, well, the 14% it must be all the people who work in Congress, because he has never met anybody who thought it was doing a good or outstanding job. I've never met anybody in my public speeches. How many of you think Congress is doing a good or outstanding job? Let's see your hands. I'm willing to put them up. Not now after I said it. Okay, good. So you had 4, 5. Now, some people think Congress is doing a great job because it's doing nothing. And, you know, if you're a libertarian, that certainly is a strong argument. If you look at the electorate is really changing significantly. We have a drop in ticket splitting. What's ticket splitting? That means you vote for the president of one party, then you vote for another party for the Senate or the House of Representatives. We used to have a significant amount of ticket splitting. We have 93% of the Democrats voted for Obama and 93% of the Republicans voted for Romney. That is a historic high. We had 90% of those who voted the same party for the president and the House. 89% that voted for the president and the Senate. In many states, we've had a lot of ticket splitting, which made a difference. If you look at the consequences of this, we've got a polarized and divided government. Divided government is when you have a different party in the House and the Senate and the presidency. It's been the norm, actually, since 1980. It's about 50-50 in terms of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, which creates a great deal of conflict and polarization. We have strong partisan battles. We have polarized electorate. The electorate, according to many surveys, multiple surveys, are divided on racial lines. They're divided on ideology, on the question of guns, which is in the news right now, and more gun control or not. They're divided on cultural issues of gay marriage and other issues. The parties are really sorting in terms of their base and the beliefs of those in their party. So we have a lot of growing polarization. And therefore, I go into the conclusion of this and say that after the election, no matter who's the president, we're going to have some problems. Problems of individualism, of people in the House and the Senate wanting to represent their districts, no matter what a president wants. Individualism fights the attempt by presidents, by the Speaker, Boehner really failed on this, to centralize power around a clear strategy, theme, and message of the party. There's really a battle between the party caucuses and conferences in the House and the Senate. As you can see in the House especially, the committee chairs that want to go in another way, the president that wants to go in another way, and we're really highly polarized on ideology, with the Tea Party on the far right and the Freedom Caucus on the far right, and the Republican Party pulling that party further to the right. The question before us when governing is, does pluralism win over party discipline? Pluralism is the phenomena of, well, we have First Amendment rights. You can organize around issues, any issue, unless it's Al-Qaeda or Hamas or some terrorist organization. You name anything in your life and there's an organization. You can organize, and the theory here is that really you have to have strong interest groups behind a particular issue beyond the party in order to get something done. Now, if you look at an example of that is 58 years ago yesterday, 58 years ago yesterday, Sputnik was put into outer space. This university is closely connected to the space race. At that time, we had a clear definition of the problem. The Soviet Union, an expansionistic, totalitarian regime, had gone into outer space. We had a consensus about the problem and the threat for many, many years. We had a consensus about mission. John F. Kennedy gave one of his most moving speeches when he said, we're going to go to the moon and back in 8 years. We do tough things. We also had all kinds of interest groups, unions, corporations, together in pursuing the mission. And we had the perception of unlimited funds, and we had a central core of authority and a new, clean, mean bureaucracy, NASA, taking the best from universities and corporations and the Air Force to do this. I mention this because there are no issues right now in America where we have consensus over what the problem is. Look at health care right now. We're still battling over health care, about the role of the government versus private sector over health care, over cost control, finance, access, and quality of health care. We did not have consensus when we passed the Affordable Care Act about what the problem was, let alone mission. We went right to mission before consensus over problem. If you look at this campaign and you look at the definition of problems, the candidates are all over the place. Today on guns, on how to have upward mobility for people in the United States to move into the middle class, over the question of immigration, even over filling potholes, over investing in infrastructure. We don't have consensus over that, and that's a problem when you go into the campaign. as well as this is a problem. You look at the members of the House of Representatives and 1982 to 2013, and it's gotten worse in 15. What is this? This is a distribution of the number of people in the House and the Senate that vote together. It's called a common vote analysis. Bear with me. It's a database of 1.8 million observations, votes. It's not just arm waving, about people who vote together. Now look at the left. The Democrats on the blue had a whole lot of blue dog Democrats. They're an endangered species these days. Blue dog Democrats were fiscal conservatives, wanted to balance the budget. They moved over and they voted with another endangered species, and that is a moderate to liberal Republican. They don't exist anymore. And if you are one, you don't talk about it. That wasn't a joke. I'll tell you when there's jokes. I'll put my hand up. I'm kidding. The ruling majority is in the middle. So when I worked on the Hill many years ago for Hubert Humphrey, you don't even know the name, his best friend in the Senate, when the Senate was like this, was Goldwater, who was very conservative. And they worked together, the Democrats and Republicans worked together. They're not working together now. They're only about 4% of the House and the Senate vote together on issues. In order to get major pieces of legislation passed, Boehner has had to work with the Democrats, but the far right, over 50 people in his caucus of 244, really punished him. He resigned as a result of that. In conclusion, let me just say that we don't have clear problems, consensus about problems and mission, as I said before. There's no central core of authority. It's not Obama anymore, and it is certainly not the Speaker, and we don't know where to go. We're polarized and divided, and we have distrust in government, and it's up to you to change this. It's up to you to get engaged in these campaigns, to run for office in your high schools, and later to run for public office, and to get the civic education that you're getting in your classes. I'm so pleased that Florida requires a class in government. All states don't do that, and that's very important. Sorry if I've gone over a bit. We can go into questions and comments.
Do you believe that as we go into 2016, there's going to be more substantial debate on the actual issues? Or do you think that other party candidates are going to be pushed into making these brazen statements, or pushed into making these sort of ideological statements that are gaining so much attention right now?
That's a terrific question. I think that every analyst in America is trying to figure that one out. My position is that right now we're at the entertainment stage of the campaign. And Americans like to be entertained, and they're being entertained by Trump and other candidates. Hillary is not that entertaining. I'm sorry. She's like the librarian that comes in and says, "You must read this and look at these issues." I think yes, we'll go into the issues. It's like the campaigns are issueless at this point, but of course they are making statements about policy positions. They're not being covered by the general media. And you'll find that in town meetings they're answering questions, sometimes vaguely, glibly. I would say Trump is in that area, and sometimes they are like Obama, the professor president, which I called him in this book called Obama in Office, because he likes to explain things in too much detail. You've got to have a balance in between. It will come. We have some serious issues about how our government's working. Now, nobody's really talking about that, about gridlock in Washington and how to change it. You know, you don't run in America by saying, "I'm a moderate, I'm going to bring people together." You know, you don't, especially at the primary stage. At the primary stage, you're very pure on the left and the right for Congress, for the House and the Senate. Everyone's worried about being primaried. That's a new verb. In the House and the Senate, as Cantor, who was going to become Speaker, was Majority Leader in the House of Representatives, first time in the history of the United States Congress, got beat in a primary because he used the C word, compromise. He said, "We need to compromise on an immigration bill." Now, there are lots of other things that happened, but that was a major issue. And so everyone, well, wait a minute, we can't move towards the middle on this issue in our party, let alone with the other party. Issues will come. The media likes to, because of the necessity of time and space, sometimes oversimplify things, but it will come. It will come certainly after the debate that's coming up for the Democrats, but it will come up with all these other debates for the Republicans, in my opinion. Good question.
How do you think it would be if Donald Trump becomes president?
Well, I was talking to the ambassador from Canada about how dysfunctional our system was and how polarized it was, and Donald Trump, and I said, I'm about ready to move to Canada, and he says, don't move here, it's even worse up here. So democracy is messy, and I think that he will not become president, but I think it would be tough. I want to be polite for those of you that support Donald Trump, but I think it's going to be, it'd be very tough. He has little experience, no experience with the public sector, except giving campaign contributions and trying to get zoning rights for building hotels and apartment complexes. So I think he would not make a great manager. He doesn't know the foreign policy very well. He is not disciplined in what he states. That's very important when you're President of the United States. Good question. How many of you plan to run for public office someday? Put your hands up. Don't be embarrassed. Good. I'd like to see all the hands up. Now, all of you, put your hands up. You're going to run for public office. At American University, we have more student body presidents than most universities. Everybody comes there in political science that want to go on and work in the White House, work in campaigns, or work in state and local government. And I encourage you to do that, but you can do it from any university, from this university, from ours, and I hope you do. Now, another question. That was a stalling tactic. Yes.
Do you believe that the sensationalizing of the campaigns has created a disinterest in that people do not feel that they can affect the system?
Well, there's a new study by a colleague of mine, I was mentioning it last night with a group of people, about your age citizens that are really turned off, significantly turned off. It's unfortunate. You're not. You're here. You're taking government classes. And Jen Lawless found that only about 5% of the sample of high school people your age were interested in politics. And that was before this campaign. I think that you get your news frequently, well, you get it on the internet, but frequently through comedy. We all miss Jon Stewart. You got it through Jon Stewart and The Daily Show. There's a lot of news in that. It was slanted, but you become somewhat cynical also, and not you personally, but the high school kids. And that's too bad, because as I started out, democracy is fragile, and if we have too much cynicism and people don't vote, they don't get involved, it really hurts the nature of politics. I think the main thing is that because of redistricting, we have safe districts for the House of Representatives. All but 30 districts are safe out of 435, meaning people win by 55% or less. So people look at that and they say, geez, it's already over after the primary. And they think, how did this jerk get nominated and the other one's not going to get elected at all? I'd like to see more competition in the general election, citizen commissions, as in California and 10 other states, drawing redistricting lines create more competition, as they do in commissions in UK, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. The competition brings more moderation, and maybe people will come together, and maybe then the attitudes of you and others about functioning of government would be better. Good question.
Do you think that these political parties are altering their policy priorities?
Do I think they're altering their policy priorities?
Yes.
I think that the position of the parties is always fluid. They're always altering their positions depending on what the problems are out there and the dominant coalition within the party. I think there's a major battle in the Republican Party right now about where they should go on some major issues like immigration, on the economy and job creation, on taxes. The Democratic Party, yes, we have the split between Bernie and Hillary, but it's more solidified. The problem is the parties don't reflect sometimes the people that are in the middle in America, even though they're becoming more polarized in the electorate. They still are too far to the left and too far to the right, and that's a problem. Yes, they alter their positions in order to get votes, but also in order to govern. Good question.
Thank you for your good questions. Let's give Dr. Thurber a round of applause.